Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. Chapter 4. The author leaves Laputa, is conveyed into Balne-Barbady, arrives at the metropolis, a description of the metropolis in the country adjoining. The author's hospitality received by a great lord, his conversation with that lord. Although I cannot say that I was ill-treated in the island, yet I must confess I thought myself to be too much neglected, without some degree of contempt, for neither prince nor people appeared to be curious in any part of knowledge, except mathematics and music, wherein I was far their inferior, and upon that account very little regarded. On the other side, after seeing all the curiosities of the island, I was very desirous to leave it, being heartily weary of those people. They were indeed excellent in two sciences for which I have great esteem, and wherein I am not unversed, but at the same time so abstracted in involved a speculation that I was never met with such disagreeable companions. I only conversed with women, tradesmen, flappers, and court pages, during my 2 months of my abode there, by which at last I rendered myself extremely contemptible. Yet these were the only people from whom I would ever receive a reasonable answer. I had obtained a hard study by a great degree of knowledge in their language. I was weary of being confined to an island where I received so little countenance, and resolved to leave it with the first opportunity. There was a great lord at the court, nearly related to the king, and for that reason alone used with respect. He was universally reckoned with the most ignorant and stupid person among them. He had performed many eminent services for the crown, had great natural and acquired parts, adorned with integrity and honour, but so ill an ear for music, that his detractors reported he had been often used to beat time in the wrong place. Neither could his tutors without extreme difficulty teach him to demonstrate the most easy proposition in mathematics. He was pleased to shew me many marks of favour, and often did me the honour of a visit, desired to be informed in the affairs of Europe, laws and customs, manners and learnings in several countries where I travelled. He listened to me with great attention, and made very wise observation on all I spoke. He had 2 flappers attending him for state, but never made use of them except at court, in visits of ceremony, and would always command them to withdraw when we were alone. I entreated this illustrious person to intercede in my behalf with his Majesty to leave to depart, which he accordingly did, and he was pleased to tell me, with regret, for indeed he had made me several offers very advantageous, which however I refused with expressions of the highest acknowledgment. On the 16th day of February I took leave of his Majesty in the court. His king made me a present to the value of about £100 English, and my protector, his kinsman, as much more, together with the letter of recommendation to his friends of Lagado, the metropolis, the island being then hovering over the mountain about 2 miles from it. I was let down from the lowest gallery, in the same manner as I had been taken up. The continent, as far as it is subject to the monarch of the Flying Island, passes under the general name of Balnibarbi. The metropolis, as I said before, is called Lagado. I felt some satisfaction in finding myself on firm ground. I walked to the city without any concern, being clad like one of the natives, and sufficiently instructed to converse with them. I soon found out that the person's house for whom I was recommended presented my letter from his friend. The grantee in the island was received with much kindness. This great lord, whose name was Menotti, offered me an apartment in his own house, where I continued during my stay, and was entertained in a most hospitable manner. The next morning after my arrival, he took me into his chariot to see the town, which is about the half the bigness of London, but the houses very strangely built, and most of them out of repairs. The people in the streets walked fast, looked wild, their eyes were fixed, and generally in rags. We passed through one of the town gates, and went about 3 miles into the country, where I saw many labourers working with several sorts of tools in the ground, but was not able to conjecture what they were talking about. Neither did I observe any expectation of either corn or grass, although the soil did appear to be excellent. I cannot forbear admiring at these odd appearances in both town and country, and I made bold to desire my conductor, that he would be pleased to explain to me what could be meant by so many bussy heads, hands, and faces, both in streets and fields, because I did not discover any good effect they produced. But on the contrary, I never knew a soil so unhappily cultivated, houses so ill contrived and so ruinous, or the people who wanted countenances and habit expressed so much misery and want. This Lord Menotti was a person of first rank, and had been some years governor of Lagado, but by capital of minister was discharged for insufficiency. However, the king treated him with tenderness, as a well-meaning man, but of low contemptible understanding. When I gave that free censure of the country and its inhabitants, he made no further answer than by telling me that I had not been long enough among them to form a judgment, and that the different nations of the world had different customs, with other common topics to the same purpose. But when we returned to his palace, he asked me how I liked the building, what absurdities I observed, and what quarrel I might with the dress or looks of his domestics. This he might safely do, because everything about him was magnificent, regular, and polite. I answered that his excellency, prudence, quality, and fortune had exempted him from those defects which folly and beggary produced in others. He said if I would go with him to his country house about 20 miles distant, where his estate lay, there would be more leisure for this kind of conversation. I told his excellency that I was entirely at his disposal, and accordingly we set out next morning. During our journey he made me observe the several methods used by farmers in managing their land, which to me were wholly unaccountable, except in some very few places I could not discover one ear of corn or blade of grass. But in 3 hours of travelling the scene was wholly altered. We came into the most beautiful country, farmer houses at small distances, neatly built, the fields enclosed, containing vineyards, corn grounds, and meadows. Neither do I remember to have seen a more delightful prospect. His excellency observed my countenance to clear up. He told me with a sigh, that there his estate began, and would continue the same till we come to his house; that his countrymen ridiculed and despised him for managing his affairs no better, for setting so ill an example to the kingdom, which, however, was followed by very few, such as were old and wilful and weak like himself. We came at length to the house, which was indeed a noble structure, built according to the best rules of ancient architecture. The fountains, the gardens, walks, avenues, and groves were all disposed with exact judgment and taste. I gave due praise to everything I saw, whereof his excellency took not the least notice till after supper. When there was no third companion, he told me with a very melancholy air that he doubted he must throw down his houses in town and country to rebuild them after the present mode, destroy all his plantations and cast others in a form as modern usage required, and give the same direction as to his tenants, unless he would submit to incur the censure of pride, singularity, affection, ignorance, caprice, and perhaps increase his Majesty's displeasure, that the admiration I appear to be under would cease or diminish when he had informed me of some particulars, which probably I have never heard of at court, and people there being too much taken up in their own speculations to have regard to what passed here below. The sum of his discourse was up to this effect, that about 40 years ago, certain persons went up to Laputa either upon business or diversion, and after 5 months' continuance came back with very little smattering in mathematics, but full of volatile spirits acquired in that airy region; but that these people, upon their return, began to dislike the management of everything below, and fell into schemes of putting all arts, sciences, and languages, and mechanics upon a new foot. To this end they procured a royal patent of erecting an academy of projectors in Lakido. The humour prevailed so strongly among the people that there is not a town or any consequence in the kingdom without such an academy in these colleges. The professors contrive new rules, new methods of agriculture and building, and new instruments and tools for all the trades and manufactures, whereby, as they undertake, one man shall do the work of 10. A palace may be built in a week, of material so durable as to last for ever without repairing, although the fruits of earth shall come to maturity at whatever season they fit to choose, and increase to 100-fold more than they do at present. With innumerable other happy proposals, the only inconvenience is, that with none of these projects are yet to be brought to perfection, in the meantime the whole country lies miserably waste, houses in ruins, the people without food or clothes, by all which, instead of being discouraged, they are 50 times more violently bent upon prosecuting their schemes, driven equally on by hope and despair, that is, for himself, not of equally enterprising spirit. He was content to go into the old forms, to live in the house of his ancestors had built, uh, and act as they did every part of life without innovation. That some of the few other persons of quality and gentry had done the same, but were looked on with eye contempt and ill will as enemies to art, ignorant, ill commonwealthsmen, preferring to their own ease and sloth before the general improvement of their country. His lordship added that he would not by any further particulars prevent the pleasure I should certainly take in viewing the Grand Academy, whither he was resolved I should go. He only desired me to observe a ruined building upon the side of a mountain, about 3 miles distant, of which he gave me this account, that he had a very convenient mill within half a mile of his house, and turned by a current from a large river, and sufficient for his own family as well as a greater number of his tenants; that, about 7 years ago, a club of those projectors came to him with proposal to destroy this mill, build another on that side of the mountain on the long ridge where a long canal must be cut for a repository of water, to convey by pipes engines to supply the mill, because wind and air upon a height agitated the water, and thereby made it fitter for motion. But water descending down a declivity would turn the mill with half the current of the river, whose course is more upon a level. He said that being not very well with the court, pressed many of his friends, he complied with the proposal, after employing 100 men for 2 years. The work miscarried. The projectors went off, laying the blame entirely on him, railing at him ever since, putting others upon the same experiment, and equal assurance of success, as well as disappointment. In a few days we came back to town, and his Excellency considered the bad character he had in the Academy, and would not go with me himself, but recommended me to a friend of his to bear me company thither. My lord was pleased to represent me as a great admirer of projects, and a person of much curiosity and easy belief, which indeed was not the truth, for I myself had been a sort of a projector in my younger days.